Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the English Daily Book Summary YouTube channel. In order to not stop learning, listen to an English book summary every day for free.
Benjamin Wallace, The Mysterious Mr. Nakamoto, a 15-year quest to unmask the secret genius behind crypto. What kind of person creates a revolutionary invention, amasses a fortune in digital wealth, then disappears, leaving the fortune behind? In 2011, 3 years after Bitcoin's creation, its creator, known as Satoshi Nakamoto, vanished. His Bitcoin wallet, now worth billions, remains unclaimed and untouched. In the years since, theories have abounded. At least 100 different people have been named as the real Satoshi. Online detectives and amateur sleuths proposed one story after another. Even 60 Minutes tried and failed to crack the case. In this blink, we'll follow author Benjamin Wallace's search for Satoshi, a search that would last years and take him across the globe chasing leads. Would he finally reveal the face behind Bitcoin? Let's find out. Chapter 1. The Birth of Bitcoin. In October 2008, as Lehman Brothers collapsed and the Federal Reserve orchestrated unprecedented bailouts, an unknown figure calling himself Satoshi Nakamoto posted to a little-known cryptography email list. His 9-page white paper outlined a peer-to-peer electronic cash system designed to operate beyond government control. 3 months later, he released the software. Bitcoin was born. Nakamoto had solved a problem that had stymied digital currency attempts for decades: the double spending problem. If digital cash exists merely as bits of data, what prevents someone from copy-pasting the same coin over and over? His solution was robust, yet radically decentralized. A transparent public ledger called the blockchain, maintained collectively by a network of volunteer computers rather than a central bank. Every 10 minutes, new transactions were bundled into a block of data and chained to previous blocks using cryptographic techniques that rendered the ledger tamper-proof. It was an ingenious design. Computers on the network competed to perform mathematical operations requiring a known amount of computational power to perform, called proof of work, with the first to do so earning newly minted bitcoins. This so-called mining process simultaneously secured the network, verified each transaction, and released new currency in a predictable pattern, capped at an ultimate limit of 21 million bitcoins. Unlike national currencies that could be printed at will, Bitcoin's supply was mathematically predetermined, making it inherently immune from inflation. The system attracted an eclectic band of early adopters: libertarians hostile to centralized authority and cypherpunks obsessed with privacy. Some programmers mined Bitcoin merely out of technical curiosity, only later recognizing Bitcoin's potential for financial autonomy. Here was money that couldn't be seized, frozen, or devalued by government decree. Initially, Bitcoin was worth just a tiny fraction of a cent. By 2010, it had risen enough to allow a programmer in Florida named Laszlo Hanyecz to make what would become Bitcoin's most iconic transaction: exchanging 10,000 Bitcoins for 2 large Papa John's pizzas. Later, these Bitcoins would eventually be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The nascent currency weathered extreme volatility in these formative years. In one harrowing month in 2011, Bitcoin plummeted from $17 to merely 1 cent after hackers compromised Mt. Gox, the largest exchange at the time, stealing 25,000 Bitcoins and shaking confidence in the fledgling system. Through these turbulent early days to the present, Bitcoin's perceived value has stemmed from visions of its future potential. Some adopters see it as a transformative technology with civilizational implications. Others, a way to make a quick buck. Fueled by both visions, Bitcoin has evolved from an obscure cryptographic curiosity into something more, a fundamental reimagining of money in the digital age. Chapter 2. Satoshi picks a successor. Gavin Andresen, an unassuming father of two who rode a unicycle in his spare time, became an unlikely Bitcoin evangelist. After discovering the currency in 2010, he was incredulous, though he found the idea of a decentralized currency appealing. He puzzled over the system's mechanics, downloaded the code, and began reading it line by line. The elegance of the solution and the apparent skill of its creator left him deeply impressed. A month later, convinced of Bitcoin's potential, Andresen spent $50 to buy thousands of Bitcoins. In a move that would seem unthinkable years later, he gave many away through a project called Bitcoin Faucet to anyone who visited his website, a promotional effort to spread adoption of the fledgling currency. Gavin was becoming increasingly dedicated to this hobby, which his wife called pretend internet money, and became more involved in its development. Though Bitcoin was an open-source project, Satoshi Nakamoto had maintained firm control during its first 20 months. But Andresen's dedication and earnestness gradually won Nakamoto's trust. As he answered forum questions and patched bugs in the software, Nakamoto took notice. Despite never meeting or even speaking by phone, Nakamoto began entrusting Andresen with greater responsibility. First access to the source code repository, then leadership of the volunteer coding team. Andresen had become the lieutenant to a commander he knew only through typed messages. Nakamoto began transferring control of the code repository to Andresen. As Bitcoin attracted more mainstream attention, journalists increasingly turned to Andresen as their go-to source, since the enigmatic Nakamoto himself couldn't be reached. Nakamoto, meanwhile, was growing increasingly uncomfortable with publicity. When some users suggested that WikiLeaks could benefit from using Bitcoin, Nakamoto objected forcefully. He believed the currency should grow gradually and that such high-profile attention threatened the project's survival. In April 2011, in an email to Andresen, he chided him for portraying Nakamoto as a mysterious, shadowy figure. The partnership ended abruptly shortly thereafter. Andresen mentioned he had been invited to give a presentation about Bitcoin at the Central Intelligence Agency headquarters and that he had accepted. Nakamoto's response was silence. He would never contact Andresen again. Very soon after, he vanished from the internet without a trace. Chapter 3: Algorithms of Anarchy. In September 1992, 20 technologists gathered cross-legged on the bare floor of mathematician Eric Hughes's Oakland apartment. The group listened intently as Tim May read aloud from his radical Crypto Anarchy manifesto, comparing encryption technology to the historical impact of the printing press. By day's end, they had coined a name, cypherpunk, and a movement was born. The cypherpunks envisioned a world where cryptography rendered government surveillance obsolete. They pursued privacy rights that would be engineered directly into systems rather than depending on the goodwill of authorities. Some were drawn to the movement for pragmatic reasons. They had unconventional personal lives they wished to protect, while others harbored deep libertarian distrust of centralized power. Their resistance to authority took creative forms. When the US government classified the encryption protocol PGP as military technology and forbade its distribution, Adam Back printed the banned algorithm on a t-shirt, transforming his body into an act of civil disobedience. Others tattooed the code on their skin. When the Clinton administration promoted the surveillance-enabling clipper chip in mobile phones, activists responded by sticking "Big Brother Inside" stickers on affected devices. On the cypherpunk mailing list, members operated under pseudonyms, allowing ideas to be evaluated on merit rather than identity. This practice protected whistleblowers and controversial thinkers while embodying their belief that true equality came through anonymity. The movement's holy grail was digital cash, anonymous, decentralized money beyond government control. David Chaum's early DigiCash system initially excited the cypherpunks, but ultimately disappointed because it required a central mint that could be regulated. As James Donald later expressed, a centralized system gives the state a throat to cut. Despite seeing their dream stall in the 1990s, a dedicated core continued the pursuit. The cypherpunk's ultimate vindication came years later when the pseudonymous Satoshi Nakamoto released Bitcoin. The new system didn't require trust in central authorities, embodying the movement's ideals of decentralization and cryptographic freedom. For veteran cypherpunks, Satoshi's appearance was the culmination of their decades-long vision: code as liberation. As Bitcoin gained prominence, so too did the mystery surrounding its creator, spawning a cottage industry of speculation about Satoshi's true identity. For the remainder of this blink, let's look at a few people whose backgrounds have made them prime suspects in Bitcoin's greatest unsolved mystery. Chapter 4: Looking for Fingerprints. Among the dozens of candidates proposed as Satoshi, Nick Szabo once stood as the most compelling. A computer scientist, legal scholar, and pioneering cryptographer, Szabo had spent decades developing concepts fundamental to cryptocurrency. His most notable contribution came in 1998 with BitGold, a decentralized digital currency system strikingly similar to what Bitcoin would later implement. Beyond his technical expertise, Szabo possessed an unusual breadth of knowledge spanning Austrian economics, game theory, and the anthropology of money, even collecting unusual historical currencies and studying their origins. The case for Szabo as Satoshi began with stylometric analysis conducted by researcher Sky Gray. This technique examined linguistic patterns in Nakamoto's white paper, revealing distinctive writing habits shared with Szabo. Both authors oddly omitted commas in similar contexts and favored certain phrases. Gray concluded the overlap went beyond shared interests to suggest common authorship. The coincidences extended beyond use of language. Despite Bitcoin clearly building upon Szabo's ideas, Satoshi's white paper curiously failed to cite him. More suspicious still was Szabo's behavior. Months before Bitcoin's emergence, he publicly discussed creating a BitGold prototype, only to abruptly abandon the project once Bitcoin launched. His silence appeared strategically timed. Apparent verbal slip-ups further fueled speculation. During an interview, Szabo once began saying, "I designed Bitcoin," before hastily correcting to BitGold, as if momentarily forgetting which creation he could publicly claim. Yet cracks in this compelling case gradually emerged. While Nakamoto's communications displayed meticulous precision, Szabo's public presentations sometimes appeared disorganized and confusing to attendees. He occasionally made factual errors that seemed incongruous for someone who had supposedly written the Bitcoin paper. What initially appeared as clear evidence became more mundane upon closer inspection. 13 years after Bitcoin's launch, with diminished legal risks and potential rewards for claiming authorship, Szabo's continued silence remained puzzling. He neither confirmed nor definitively denied involvement, maintaining an ambiguous position that ultimately led to waning confidence in his candidacy. What once appeared as overwhelming circumstantial evidence had dissolved into yet another unsolved mystery in Bitcoin's origin story. Chapter 5: The Crypto Ninja. As a child in Brisbane, Craig Wright seemed perpetually out of sync with his peers. While other children played football, he invited classmates to examine his insect collection. Raised in a turbulent home with an abusive father and alcoholic mother, Wright found refuge in his bedroom and in the influence of his grandfather, a Second World War veteran who filled the house with military artifacts and sparked Wright's fixation on Japanese culture. The young Wright practiced with a samurai sword in public parks while dressed in ninja outfits. Online, Wright displayed both technical skill and social awkwardness. In cryptography forums, he pedantically corrected others' word choices and boasted of connections to elite hacker groups such as the notorious Legion of Doom. It was through these technical circles that he met Dave Kleiman, a paralyzed Florida forensics expert. Together, they formed a cybersecurity venture called W&K. After Kleiman's death in 2013, found alone amid signs of neglect and illness, Wright approached Kleiman's brother Ira with an extraordinary claim. He and Dave were the secret creators of Bitcoin. Wright was the visionary, and Kleiman the collaborator. Satoshi Nakamoto, he insisted, was never meant to be a single person. When media outlets publicized Wright's claim, the crypto community responded with skepticism. Some of the evidence he provided seemed manipulated. His PGP key seemed to have been created with more recent tools, and there was a notable contrast in character. Nakamoto was obsessed with privacy, refusing fame or fortune, while Wright aggressively sought recognition. As the controversy intensified, something more was needed to settle the matter of Wright's claims once and for all. Chapter 6: Smoke and Mirrors. A turning point would arrive in a London hotel room in April 2016. Gavin Andresen, exhausted from his Boston flight but alert to the significance of the moment, prepared to witness cryptocurrency history. As one of Bitcoin's earliest developers, with direct communication history with Nakamoto, Andresen was uniquely positioned to evaluate Craig Wright's astounding claim. After years of dismissing false Satoshi pretenders, Andresen had found himself intrigued by Wright's technical depth. The man who greeted him was immaculately dressed, exuding confidence. Wright spoke of Bitcoin's creation as a collaborative effort involving himself, Dave Kleiman, and another cryptographer. Mentioning Kleiman, his composure faltered, his eyes welling with emotion. The demonstration began. Using his laptop, Wright cryptographically signed a phrase Andresen had chosen. Gavin's favorite number is 11. After a brief glitch, the verification succeeded. Gavin shook Wright's hand, believing he'd finally met Bitcoin's creator. The public unveiling that followed quickly descended into chaos. Wright published a blog post purportedly containing cryptographic proof of his identity, but technical analysts swiftly identified the signature as merely copied from a 2009 public Bitcoin transaction. This made it worthless as evidence. At a subsequent blockchain conference, Ethereum founder Vitalik Buterin publicly challenged Wright, pointing out that genuine proof required nothing more than a simple message signing with Satoshi's keys, not elaborate demonstrations behind closed doors. To salvage credibility, Wright's team proposed a transaction test. Gavin sent 0.11 Bitcoin to an early Nakamoto-linked address, with Wright promising to return it. As the deadline approached, Wright suddenly claimed legal complications prevented him from accessing the keys. When pressured to proceed anyway, the situation took a bizarre turn. Wright abruptly left discussions and was subsequently found unconscious in the bathroom, bleeding beside a large knife. When Wright was released from the hospital the next day, he told journalists that public proof would endanger his family. The spectacle continued, with Wright circulating a link to a fabricated news article about potential criminal charges against him. In a private message to Andresen, he insisted he hadn't lied, but preferred being labeled a fraud to proceeding with his revelations. Eventually, Gavin Andresen, once convinced, publicly disavowed his belief in Wright as Satoshi. The cryptocurrency world continued its fascination with Nakamoto's true identity, while Wright's dramatic performance became a cautionary tale. In Bitcoin's trustless architecture, truth was to be found not in human testimony, but in the immutable records of the blockchain. Chapter 7: Questions without answers. Among the numerous candidates proposed as Bitcoin's creator Satoshi Nakamoto, James Donald stood out, enough to compel the author to travel around the world to meet him. Donald was an intriguing suspect. Born in 1952, he had taken a peculiar ideological journey from radical leftist youth to anarcho-capitalist, eventually embracing extreme neo-reactionary views. His professional life was equally winding. After his PhD dissertation on cosmology was rejected at the University of Sydney, he pivoted to tech, developing software for Apple and database companies like Inform.ix. Certain evidence pointed strongly in Donald's direction. He was among the first to respond to Satoshi's original Bitcoin announcement, raising technical currencies that displayed a deep understanding of digital currencies. Stylometric analysis revealed unusual linguistic patterns, rare words and phrases that he and Nakamoto shared. His programming-style software shared distinctive elements with Bitcoin's code, both using C++, Hungarian notation, and similar code formatting. Perhaps most tellingly, Donald had registered netcoin.com around the same time as bitcoin.org was created. Yet contradictory evidence existed. Deeper analysis comparing Donald's code with Bitcoin's source files revealed important differences. Furthermore, Donald's abrasive online persona also contrasted sharply with Nakamoto's unfailingly measured and polite communications. Wallace's investigation culminated in an ambitious journey to Australia. He hired a private investigator who confirmed Donald lived in a secluded beach community near Brisbane. Wallace would pay him a visit, despite warnings about Donald's secretive nature and reported gun ownership. He embarked on a grueling series of flights: San Francisco to Melbourne, Melbourne to Brisbane, and finally to a small Queensland city before driving 40 minutes to the coast. Donald's home sat secluded at the end of a steep driveway. Wallace nervously knocked on the door. After an anxious wait, Donald appeared, surprisingly amiable. The interaction was brief, and Donald revealed little, insisting, "I can't even tell you what I don't tell you." Pressed further on Satoshi's identity, he said he had a strong suspicion, but couldn't say for certain. When Wallace offered to take him a beer, Donald quipped, "In wine, there is truth, and I'm obligated not to tell people the truth." Wallace sensed Donald shutting down until finally, and without answers, it was time to leave. Had it been worth it? Had the grueling journey, nearly 40 hours of travel for a few minutes of evasive conversation, been worthwhile? Years spent down the Satoshi rabbit hole had led to this moment, only to yield more questions than answers. Confronting this, Wallace suggests that the legend of Satoshi Nakamoto might hold more power than any individual could. Over 15 years later, the question, "Who is Satoshi?" has become central to Bitcoin's mythology. In Budapest, artists unveiled a bronze figure with a featureless face beneath a hood, a metallic ghost representing digital freedom. Satoshi, the legend, became a symbol for freedom from centralized control and for genius operating beyond ego. The main takeaway of this blink to the mysterious Mr. Nakamoto by Benjamin Wallace is that the true identity of Bitcoin's creator remains one of technology's greatest unsolved mysteries. Born during the 2008 financial crisis, Bitcoin emerged as a revolutionary financial system beyond government control, created by the pseudonymous creator who vanished in 2011. Since its creation, Bitcoin's value has risen from a small fraction of a cent to, at the time of writing, $82,000 per Bitcoin, with a staggering total market cap of over $1.5 trillion. Despite years of investigation examining promising candidates like Nick Szabo, Craig Wright, and James Donald, the mystery endures. Perhaps Nakamoto's anonymity represents the ultimate fulfillment of cypherpunk ideology, where code becomes more powerful than identity, and systems function based on mathematical verification rather than human authority. Nakamoto's disappearance was his final gift